Hey guys, this is the introduction video for a brand new review series that I'm going to be working on. It isn't going to be an every week kind of thing, it's going to be more like an every few weeks kind of thing, and it is going to be very, very long. As I'm sure you realized from the title of the video, the review series will be covering Yu-Gi-Oh! As this isn't the kind of thing I typically cover on this channel, I decided that rather than simply jumping into the review of the first chapter, I would make an introduction video to just kind of set things up. Actually, hold on a second. This is the background I usually use for my Steven Universe videos. Let me go ahead and change that out. There we go. That's a little more appropriate. First thing you need to know, now these reviews will not all be in this format. They will be in more of the conversational, me talking to the camera kind of format. This video is just a little different since it isn't actually part of the main review series. Let's get something out of the way about me. I like dark stuff in general, and I also like the kind of stories that are dark in a way that the characters acknowledge that they live in a dark world and just kind of treat it as mundane, as if it is just a regular slice of life kind of thing. It's part of the reason why I love Buffy and the live-action Casper movie and the Addams Family movies and pretty much anything with a young Christina Ricci in it. And it's also a big part of the reason why I like Steven Universe. Granted, there are other reasons to like all of these things, except for the Casper movie. But for me, anyway, that is a big part of it. The property doesn't even have to be particularly witty. It simply has to have that creepy twisted is a slice of life kind of vibe. I also just eat up the story of the classic badass, the character who goes into a situation way over his head and just gets shit done, all the while giving the impression that it's all no big deal. Again, Buffy comes to mind here. Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't Buffy. It's not as good as Buffy, but it does encapsulate a lot of these sentiments fairly well. You have a kids save the world plot, which is so over the top that it goes beyond cliche at this point. But you also have a hero so badass that he literally smiles in his enemies' faces as they realize the corner that he's trapped them in. And you have all of that taking place in this ridiculous, overblown world where technology and magic are practically indistinguishable, with Saturday morning cartoon villains, more violence than a B-movie, and a protagonist with an ancient ghost alter ego, something or other, literally living in the back of his head. It just encapsulates so many things that I personally really enjoy that it may be the perfect property for me, or at least one of them. It's pretty high up on the list. And I still enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh! To this day. I own every volume of the original run of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga. It's that manga series that is what this review series is going to be about, obviously. And I don't think the most recent anime is all that bad. Heck, I don't think the anime is all that bad in general. Well, except for the dub version. But that's an entirely different story. Now, there is a reason for me doing an introductory video before starting the review series properly, and that's because Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't Steven Universe, or Doctor Who, or Transformers, or any of the other stuff that I've ever covered on this channel. All of those properties can have a dark edge to them from one degree or another, but they are primarily kids or family shows first. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not. Despite what the ultimate evil for kids would have you believe, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is made for older teens and young adults. It contains murder, criminal references, dark magic, sadism, the occult, and the kind of awkward and off-putting sexual references that only a shonen manga trying to find its voice can have, especially early on. So needless to say, this review series will cover those topics, which is why I'm rating it PG-13 and why I feel okay that there will be minor swearing in this series. If any of that bothers you, first of all, I'd like to ask why you're on the internet in the first place, but more importantly, I'd like to warn you to stay away from this review series. You have been warned. If that doesn't bother you though, well, here we go. Starting out and rounding out this introductory video, I want to address some of the misconceptions that you may have about Yu-Gi-Oh!, assuming that you aren't familiar with the property directly. First of all, you may think that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just a long commercial for card games. After all, Yu-Gi-Oh! Revolves entirely around a card game, doesn't it? Well, you're wrong. That's Yu-Gi-Oh! Now. And only some of the time, actually. At least in Japan, where they take it more seriously. It's worse here, with the dub being pretty shamelessly bad, broadening the demographic way too far, and openly sacrificing story for commercialism. While the Japanese version is still about selling the trading cards, they at least acknowledge that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is first and foremost an anime property. There's also the fact that Yu-Gi-Oh! Wasn't originally about a card game. To start out, it was just a shonen manga where the martial art of choice for the hero just happened to be games. Games in general. This allowed him to be a hero who won with brain over brawn, but there could still be pretty heavy action. It all stems from the author's love of games and gaming, and as a fan of games myself, a huge part of me wishes that the series had remained the way it was early on, only focusing on a particular game for a few issues at most. Even though I do like the Duel Monsters era, for the most part. Second, you might think that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is, despite being mature and dark, also cheesy power of friendship bullshit. And that's not a misconception at all. You're entirely right. If you don't like that kind of thing, you won't like Yu-Gi-Oh! I, however, eat it up, so I do. I did tell you that this was probably the ultimate property for me, right? Yu-Gi-Oh! Grows and changes a lot pretty early on in its run, from the art style to the story direction to the fact that the author, Kazuki Takahashi, really didn't know what he wanted the series to be about above and beyond games and the mysterious in real life, which is a direct quote from him. There are plot lines early on that simply don't go in the direction that you expect them to, and the series is very retcon heavy, so there are probably other misconceptions that you have about the series as well, especially if you aren't familiar with the early run of the manga. But we'll address those as we go. Beginning in the next video, the puzzle of the gods.